Mark Capani had the look, the drive, the desire to get better, and he had nothing but time on his side to get better and better in the world of professional wrestling. Unfortunately, a gimmick that started out well enough would become the albatross and would become the eventual thing that would drag him down and completely out of professional wrestling because the brain trust of Vince McMahon, Stephanie, as well as John Laurinaitis, Mr. Excitement, People Power, and the various other people thought, hey, we're just going to go back to the 19 goddamn 80s, not realizing this 2005, man, woman, animal, vegetable, mineral, want to be alive. They want to invest themselves in a program that they can lose themselves in and ignore the outside world. And an outside of wrestling event, a real life event in London, basically put the kibosh on the Muhammad Hassan character because they didn't know when to just pull back. And the network and sponsors basically said, no more Hassan Shop. I'm John Renton with my review of Dark Side of the Ring becoming Muhammad Hassan. Mark Capani really deserved better than he got from the world of professional wrestling. He seems happy now, and I'm thrilled for him. Honestly, I'm thrilled for him. I really enjoyed this episode. It did end up reminding me of a lot of shit that I hated at the time. And the thing is, and I'll get into more of the details as, I talk about how this thing unfolded. He was bringing up reasonable goddamn points. This character, was introduced just, in the mere aftermath of 9/11. And yeah, you can say, oh, it's been a few years. It was a hell of a goddamn world-changing event. It was definitely a nation-changing event. Keep your conspiracy theories out of the fucking comments, by the way, or I'll ban you. Just gonna say that. And honestly, capitalizing on real life events and doing stuff, you can do that if you actually have some tact and have the ability to, carry things forward. And he was bringing up real, worthy points of discussion about Arab Americans, Middle Eastern people, whatever. Whatever label you want to put, any bubble you want to put people in that were being besieged and just assaulted verbally and physically because of how they looked, because of the actions of a few goddamn radical morons. That's really what it comes down to. And it's fucking bullshit. The talking heads, by the way, were great. You had Mark Capani himself, a.k.a. Muhammad Hassan. They didn't get Sean Davari. He does work for WWE as an agent. Maybe he wasn't comfortable, easy for me to say, participating. They did have a little bit of shoot interview footage. That was nice. Jim Cornette, because he worked with him in OVW. Maven, who honestly God has the weirdest southern accent. I like Maven. He has a very strange way of talking, but he seems to be on the right path. He does have a good YouTube channel, and he does seem like he's a genuinely pretty good guy. Gene Snitsky, fun fact, I was there for Snitsky's debut. Kane roster debut. They brought him out. Kane came out with the pregnant Lita. Eventually, Snitsky hit Kane in the back with a chair. He fell on the pregnant Lita, and she was having a miscarriage right there. And we chanted Baby Killer, and we made a cameraman laugh all the way through the commercial break. Wrestling. That was just a few months before Muhammad Hassan actually got introduced. Chris Masters, no issue with him. Bit weird how, you got people, Maven's in, his mid-40s, Hassan's in his mid-40s, Masters, I think, is about in his mid-40s. You got people that really were given, a sizable amount of TV time, and they were pretty young. I think Snitsky's about 50. But Michael Leonardi, who is a writer, more on him in a bit, and John Pollock, who is a journalist. So, known as Mark Magnus in OVW. He was doing a model type gimmick or whatever, or the next, great thing. I forget how they worded it. I didn't watch enough of OVW. But he really did have the potential to be at least a long-term featured wrestler. I don't know if he would have worked out long-term as a world champion. We'll never know. He might have flamed out in a few years. The way they were going with the character, if they had just done it, up to, say, WrestleMania, that might have been okay. And, just stayed on that path. Doing little tweaks and everything, but not going full-on crazy like they did. Vince basically killed his career before it had a chance to really start. The rise, the fall, the rebirth was a label about this, and it does make sense. Cornette was great here because he worked with him, and he worked with a lot of young talents. And he was 21 when he got to OVW, and within like a year or so, he went from a year or two, he was from the bottom all the way to the top, penthouse to the outhouse to the penthouse. And it's remarkable that he was 21, which good on him for still, finding, what he feels is a great purpose in life, because a lot of people do flame out when it comes to wrestling. Want to make him an Arab, but he's an Italian from Syracuse. Now, he had the dark enough complexion to pull it off, to be fair. He looked the part. The problem is, actual Arab Americans and Arabs in general could see through it. The wounds of 9/11 were still very much open. The post 9/11 SmackDown. Hey, I remember the post 9/11 SmackDown. What about Stephanie McMahon comparing the 3,000 people that died in the tower attacks and the various other attacks? She compared that to what her family went through in the steroid trials. I will never forgive that dumb, implant-infested twat for thinking that. Put me in a room with her for 10 goddamn minutes. I'll have her crying out every goddamn pore she has. That dumb broad, thinking that she's as smart as her dad. Her dad's a horrible human being that will go to the deepest, darkest depths of hell for what he did. But she's going to be right there with him because she's just as bad as he is. It just ain't come out yet. Comparing the 9/11 attacks to steroid trials. Please. Fucking bitch. She deserves to be called a bitch, by the way. By the way, the numerous times that she got called an SU or SLUT, and she got called various things. Yeah, well, she asked for it, didn't she? So, Sean Davari was his manager, and Sean actually, being able to speak Farsi and the prejudices that he went through, Mark got to see that. They showed OVW footage with Orlando Jordan. Who remembers Orlando Jordan? Fun fact, Orlando Jordan had the Ultimate Warrior's last ever known match. I'm not kidding. It was in Spain, I believe. I think it was Spain. It was a terrible match, by the way, because it was the Ultimate Warrior. By the way, fuck the Ultimate Warrior. I'm glad he's dead. So, they mentioned about, various foreign heels and stuff like that. Hassan brought up Ringable points. And then Ivory and Todd Grisham were talking, I think, on WWF Radio or whatever it was, and said, Todd says he's going to drive. Oh, good, I don't want you flying. Ooh. I mean, I laughed because I like dark humor, but, ooh. And that was right before the debut of this character. Vince wasn't with the times anymore. That was pretty obvious here. Don't get me wrong, they were still pulling in good ratings. They were still pulling in good buy rates on pay-per-view, at least relatively speaking. But oh boy, they mentioned, Fritz von Erich. They mentioned Karl von Hess, various other heels. But then they talked about the patriotism aspect of WWE, Tribute to the Troops, which had started in like 2003. And, oh yeah, the 2005 Tribute to the Troops, somewhere around there. I remember that one. Was it 2005 or 2006 where Ashley Mazzaro suffered something horrible that happened to her because of somebody that posed as a doctor or whatever? And don't tell anybody because it might disrupt our relationship with the troops. Or you could have just held that person accountable. And whoever did do that to Ashley, I hope that every bit of bad karma came for them. If they have a family, I hope that family left them. If they have friends, I hope those friends found out about it and left them. And I hope whoever that is, if they're not dead, they won't be watching this. They'll probably be hiding their head in the goddamn ground, which they should do. Taking their last breath and then dying, knowing that nobody should ever have fucking missed them and should have ever known them. They should have never been allowed to even reach adulthood if that's how they're going to treat a woman. And whether Ashley Mazzaro was your favorite or not, she didn't deserve that. Off my soapbox. Let's get back to it. So, the fans were booing Hassan and Davari even though he's making reasonable points. But then they harken back to, when Vince tried it with Slaughter and Hogan, the evil Slaughter, should have been evil Hogan, evil Slaughter Iraqi sympathizer with General Adnan, who was Sheikh Adnan El-Kaisi in the AWA, and the various people that the various people that were involved in that. By various people, I mean Colonel Mustafa, the Iron Sheik, and we all knew he was the Iron Sheik, but whatever, it's fine. It's like when Tony Atlas was Saba Simba. As Tony Atlas, as Roddy Piper said, check out my review of that. But Mania 7, oh no, it had to be moved from, the big old stadium out there in LA to the LA Sports Arena because of security concerns. Bruce Pritchard, that jolly fuck that deserves every bit of ridicule that he gets, said it was security concerns. No, it wasn't. They barely sold 10, 11,000 tickets, and they had to basically move it to the LA Sports Arena, which honestly, it turned out to be a better thing because it was a great atmosphere. It was a raucous crowd. That worked. If they had only had about 30,000 people in that goddamn stadium, you wouldn't have been able to shoot around that. It would have been like the Parade of Champions in 1987 or 88 in Dallas. So, the thing is that, they he got to see the prejudice. He got to see what Daivari went through. Actual Arrows were not happy. There was a time where Snitsky was saying, are we going to get in a real fight? Are we going to have to use real chairs? Broken glass everywhere? We're getting in trouble and we just don't care. But the locker room etiquette, shaking the hands, I've never been in a wrestling locker room. I don't know. But then the clip that had been going around before the Dark Side tweet out was about Eddie using the camel clutch and Hassan was using that as a finish. And he said, well, maybe you shouldn't do that. And Hassan didn't mean anything by it. But, by using the camel clutch, Gory Guerrero invented it. Invented, popularized, whatever. I mean, who knows who invented something. But, yeah, there's quite a bit of history with the Guerreros and the camel clutch. And because of that, he was taking the wrestler's court. Where Undertaker was probably very happy to pick on a minority, or at least somebody that looked like a minority, which is what he did. Thank God Mark Capani wasn't gay like Canyon was, or he might have gotten his brains beaten in. But he had to buy over $1,000 worth of alcohol. They were in Japan. They were pouring the drinks out on the floor, which I'm sure the staff absolutely loved. Boy, but that was another plane ride from hell. Eddie was cool with it afterwards. He says, I know you didn't mean anything by it. Mania 21 segment with Hogan, they cut out Eugene being part of that, which is probably good because Eugene turned out to actually, Eugene, a.k.a. Nick Dinsmore, actually turned out to be dumber than the character he portrayed because of his politics. But Hogan came down. He had just recently had either hip or knee surgery. I forget which one it was, but he had just been inducted in the Hall of Fame. They weren't sure about him having a match. In all honesty, if they had had an impromptu match and he had faced off against Daivari and beaten Daivari, I don't really think that would have mattered. You could beat the manager and it wouldn't matter. They skipped over Backlash 2005 where Hogan and Michaels teamed up to face Hassan and Daivari, which honestly was a pretty good match, all things considered. And to think he's only in the infancy of his main roster run. He'd been in OVW for about 18 months to 2 years. But then the character really became more insensitive. And Stephanie's like, we know what we're doing. No, you don't. No, you don't. You never knew what the fuck you were doing in creative anyway. And as a fan, Stephanie doesn't have a creative bone or goddamn body. She's had numerous other bones in her body. I mean, she's probably more than Hunter's. But that being said, I digress. Let's move on from that. So, he kept doing it. His dad told him, got to keep doing this. He even said that about the wrestlers, or the Eddie Guerrero thing. Like, you get back out there and you take your lumps, you do this. But he didn't feel comfortable doing this character, at least with the way they were going. And it was getting ridiculous. I mean, they were, after the Backlash thing, he was going into a feud with The Undertaker. It was going to be a number one contenders match, Great American Bash. And I remember watching the TV at the time, watching the pay-per-views at the time, or keeping up with the results of the pay-per-views. The feeling was he was going to, by nefarious means or whatever, he was going to beat The Undertaker and was going to face Batista at SummerSlam. And probably beat him. Batista, who had just come off that hot feud with Triple H, where he beat him 3 times. He was going to beat him. And then the London tunnel bombings, which I'm not going to get into, the subway bomb, whatever it is. I'm not going to get into a long dissertation about that, but everybody involved, every victim, I feel so bad for the victims of that. But radical idiots doing this shit. Terrible. The thing is, they then had, WWE had shot an angle where it was a bunch of hooded guys coming out and choking out Undertaker with some kind of wire, and then the camel clutch and this kind of stuff, and Daivari is carried out like a martyr. And bless Capani, he did the best he could. But I could even see, looking back at these clips, he's not comfortable with it. He's not. Bless him. He tried. But this SmackDown aired on tape delay the same day that the bombings happened. Now, had they cut that segment, I don't know if his career would have been saved. It wouldn't have hurt. They ran a chyron saying, we pre-taped this, and in light of this stuff and everything, people may find this uncomfortable. You think? The network was like, no, we're not going to do this. Maybe said, Chef Boyardee is not going to run an ad after this. And they just, it was a stupid segment. I mean, I remember watching this at first, and I don't know if after Great American Bash, I don't know if I watched SmackDown for a bit. I'm trying to remember, because we're on UPNs. I remember watching that SummerSlam, and I don't think I watched any other pay-per-view for the rest of the year. I don't know if I watched Survivor Series. I'm not totally sure. But yeah, then they talked about a couple Americans that were beheaded, including a journalist. And he was written off. Great American Bash 2005. That was going to be the end. Leonardi spoke up and basically got demoted for saying that it was wrong. Yeah, he got spoken because Vince McMahon doesn't like being told that he doesn't know what the fuck he's doing. And unfortunately made out like a bandit with a whole bunch of money that he really didn't fucking earn, but TKO had to pay him off. So it didn't work because it was a terrible idea. And I'm not knocking Capani here. I'm not knocking Mark. He was doing what he was told, and it bit him in the ass. John Laurinaitis basically told him when he mentioned about buying a home, Mark says, don't buy the home. Or don't buy the house, because he was going to get canned. Powerbomb through the stage. He actually ended up hitting the crash pad and rolling and actually laying on his feet, so they had to remove that, put some cables and stuff like that, and put a blood splatter thing down really quick, so it looked like he hit the concrete, and he literally got murdered on live television. Ironic that they featured him in a clip against Chris Benoit, an actual renowned murderer, a couple of years later. At least we got to see a clip of Hassan choking out noted bigot, piece of shit Val Venus. That was nice. So, he was curious what was next. He went into a bit of a depression. He, was in LA, ran out of money. He was back home, and he went to college, because at this point, so 20, he was like 24? 24, 25? Something like that? Which means he's only 45, good lord. I did not realize he was that close to my age. But I'm 44 right now, I'll be 45 in January. But he went to college to get his education, he worked nights at UPS, got into teaching, became a principal. Now he works with, he works with groups and stuff like that and affects a lot of children's lives in a positive way. Sean is an agent in WWE. He still talks to him. He doesn't look back in anger, but he did not focus on wrestling for a bit. If I remember right, didn't Capani actually make a one-night return at an indie show? Like in, what was it, 2018 or 2019 or something like that? Or was it after the pandemic? I'm genuinely trying to remember. I do recall him being in one other match. Which, good for him, and he seems happy. And honest to God, he should be. He should be fucking happy. I'm crumbling up these notes. But that's it for Dark Side of the Ring, Season 6. I assume Season 7 is happening. I don't know, though, because I don't know how long Vice is going to be around. Maybe Netflix can pick it up and we actually could have it at a reasonable time. And on something that a lot of people can see. So, because Sling is about the only way I can watch Vice based on my cable satellite package. Nevertheless, I'm happy for Mark Capone. I wish it had worked out better in wrestling, but now that he's had such a happy, healthy life, apparently in the last number of years after going through that rough patch, he did deserve better, but he got his in the end, and I'm happy for him. Still, terrible way they went with that character arc. It should have gone so much smoother. But everybody was behind the goddamn times, at least everybody in a position of power. That being said, that is the end of this episode of Dark Side of the Ring. That is the end of this season. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Like, share, subscribe, Twitter, Letterboxd, Blue Sky handles in the description. I'm John Rethlin, and I'll see you soon.